Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest in our series of virtual curator spotlights from Cooperstown, New York. We're so glad that you folks could join us today. We are going to feature one of our virtual curator spotlights. These are a series of programs. We do one a week where we take a different exhibit from the museum, which of course is currently closed, and we take a closer look at that exhibit, the process of putting it together, talk about some of the images, the artifacts featured there. And today we will put the focus on Diamond Dreams, our Women in Baseball exhibit, which quite frankly is one of the most popular exhibits at the Baseball Hall of Fame. Joining us to break down the exhibit, talk a little bit about the subject of women in baseball in general, is our curator, Gabrielle Augustine, who is also a ball player as well. We'll be talking about that. Gabrielle, welcome to the program. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. Thanks for having me, Bruce. I'm happy to be back, and I'm so thrilled to be able to chat about Diamond Dreams because this is one of the first exhibits I beeline towards when I first came to the Hall of Fame back in 2014. That was my first visit ever. Yeah. And obviously, as a female baseball player myself, this has some special meaning to me because without the women that we talk about in this exhibit, I would not have gotten the chance to play baseball.
And we're going to talk more about your playing career in a little while. Yep. This exhibit, as we currently call it, Diamond Dreams, which is a full exhibit on the second floor of the museum, started in 2005, but actually was predated by a smaller display that goes way back to the late 1980s at the Hall of Fame.
Yep, correct. It was actually that small exhibit case back in the late 80s that inspired Penny Marshall to create a league of their own. And so that then popularized people learning about women in baseball and brought women baseball players to more of a center front of discussion. And so that's how we then developed, this was before my time, but how this exhibit was developed because it was such a popular topic, and to be able to explore this topic. And that's what we want to do in this exhibit.
The original exhibit was curated by our curator emeritus, Ted Spencer, retired now, but we still see him come through the building with his distinctive voice. You always know when Ted's around. And I know Ted takes a great deal of pride, and rightly so, in creating the original exhibit. And you mentioned that great connection, the motivation, if you will, for Penny Marshall and the film, which has brought so much notoriety to this subject matter. The current exhibit that we do call Diamond Dreams did start in 2005. When you walk in, this is kind of the opening panel. It's a photograph, not of the actresses from the movie A League of Their Own, but those are actual players from the All-American League. And then there's sort of a diamond-shaped panel there that looks a little bit like an infield and has a bit of a message referring to Katie Casey, "Take me out to the ball game." Now, just to give you a bit of an overview of what the exhibit looks like, here we kind of get a larger sense of the motif that is used. Green's my favorite color, so I really like the use of the green here. And you can see the panels. On the left side is that introductory panel when you first walk in. And then there's the other walls covered with images and artifacts. There's a lot to be found in this particular exhibit. Gabrielle, tell me about the first time that you saw this particular exhibit. Was it when you joined the Hall of Fame staff, or had you seen it before that?
No, it was, I had come to Cooperstown for a baseball tournament, which we can chat about later, back in 2014. And so my family and I made the trip up here, and it was actually about a 3-hour drive from where I grew up, which we did not know the Hall of Fame was so close. And yeah, this is, that was the first time I saw this exhibit, and I was just blown away, obviously, because having done a little bit before that, some learning about women in baseball, obviously the focus, thinking about the 40s with the AAGPBL being, what is most talked about, but then that this exhibit actually explores what women have done on and off the field. So there's more than, yes, primarily we, have women playing baseball, but there's others who are executives, owners, broadcasters. And so there's so much more to the women's story in baseball. And I love that about this exhibit, is that it explores so much. And honestly, I mean, we use so many graphics and images of these women, because if we had an artifact for every one of them, this entire exhibit would take up the entire second floor, which I'd be thrilled about, but we have to tell a comprehensive story of baseball.
When you first saw it, was there one image, one artifact, one panel that really struck you?
I really love the big introductory panel that you just talked about, because those 4 women in that photo, I believe, are supposed to be the first 4 women who signed for the AAGPBL. But I also really love the case that we'll show later, of the artifacts from the women who played, and getting a close-up of their uniforms that they wore in the 40s that were pretty short skirts, and that they were actually diving, sliding, and playing ball in those outfits.
As we proceed this morning, we're going to show some images. Many of them are featured in the exhibit, and these are all images that really help tell the story of women in baseball. And in terms of organized play, it really goes back to the 1860s. It was 1866, Vassar College, which is now a co-ed school, but back in the 1800s was still a women's college. It's a college located in New York State, still exists to this day. But in 1866, they started really the first organized women's baseball team, the Vassar College Resolutes. And you can see the word Resolute on their belts. You pointed that out to me the other day. And the uniforms, which we put in quotes, not ideal for playing baseball.
No, definitely not. Those are probably in this photo, which was taken in 1876, so about a decade after the teams were formed. This is what they were wearing to play baseball. And these are very full skirts, very much of the era of the 1870s. And so you can imagine under those skirts that they're wearing petticoats. And so many layers, and they're actually getting around and playing baseball wearing these dresses. And it was the reason this team was formed was actually because it was an option. And one of the things Vassar College prided themselves on was that their women also got physical activity, because that helped them stimulate the mind for their studies. And so baseball was one of those physical activity options. And so that's pretty cool that they went around and they played ball. And I love that. I love looking at old photos, because you can see some of these old fashions, and that the fact that, they have their team name on their belts, and they're wearing these, really cute, caps. But the fact that they're playing in dresses absolutely floors me.
So they were the first college team, first really organized team. Other colleges soon followed suit to give them some, fairly even competition, if you will. Sadly, though, only a couple of years after this photograph was taken, as you mentioned, 1876, the team was disbanded, not because the players wanted that, but I guess their parents were objecting to having their daughters play. Yep.
They thought it was a crude sport, as it were. It was much too strenuous for their daughters, and so they complained to the college, and the program got shut down.
So that was an early setback, but we would see some other women's teams and some individual pioneers pick up the slack. And certainly when you talk about individual pioneers, a great person to begin with, not a player, but an umpire, Amanda Clement. You see the photo of Amanda on the left, and we actually have an intriguing artifact connected to Amanda's career, a baseball that was used in a series of games in Iowa. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So Amanda umpired from about 1904 to 1911 in and around her home state of South Dakota. And so this baseball is actually from one of the games that she umpired in 1908, as you said, in Iowa. And this ball was donated by a relative. So that's really cool that it got passed down and then was donated to us. and that we have this piece of history to help document her groundbreaking ability, that she went out and, was doing something that men were typically doing, that she was umpiring games. And it's in the early 1900s, late 1800s, it was uncommon enough to have female baseball players. But it was even rarer for female umpires. I mean, even today, there's been only a handful of women who have umpired in the minor leagues. No women has broken that line yet in the major leagues yet either. It wasn't, so it's interesting with the women's stories that there's a lot of pioneers who broke ground and then they get shut down, or, there wouldn't be another woman who did that followed in those footsteps, for a couple decades. And so it's sort of like a dance, one step forward, one step back, and, trying to always build and get better with the equality. But it wasn't until the early 70s with Bernice Gira that we had umpires in the minor leagues. The highest who has ever reached the highest point and pinnacle in umpiring right now was AAA with Ria Cortesia. But right now we do have two umpires in, I think they're both in single A right now, Jen Powell and Emma Charlesworth Sealer. I've both met, and they're wonderful women, and I'm so thrilled that they're going down this umpiring path, and hopefully they'll break some barriers while they're at it.
Umpires, whether male or female, generally are not popular with the fans. That's not their purpose. But Amanda was an exception to that rule. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was. I don't know what charisma, character that she had. She was well known and well liked. So that's pretty awesome, and pretty rare story for an umpire.
The image on the left is, in a way, it's a little bit amusing. It has her job, but in a plural, umps. It's kind of a weird, of a weird jersey there, but it's all part of this very intriguing story. Let's talk about an early pioneer among the players, Alta Weiss. We're talking similar time frame, early 1900s, turn of the century. Alta was a young pitcher, started as a teenager, and actually joined a men's semi-professional team. So she was the only female playing on a team, and I'm going to assume that some of the male players were quite a bit older than her, and she did very well.
Yep. First of all the props for being able to pitch in that skirt that she's wearing in that photo. And that skirt's wool, that's heavy, because that is what women wore of the time. So all the props for that. But yeah, she was a fantastic pitcher. She's she, like you said, she was part of an all-male team. There's actually the team became known as the Weiss All-Stars. To my understanding, from my research, that the team was actually purchased and then named by her father. But yeah, so that's how it became the Weiss All-Stars. But yeah, she was the only female on that team. And she did not wear skirts the entire time. In a photo that we have in the exhibit, and also artifact, we have her uniform from one of the years that she played with the All-Stars, and it's actually bloomers. So a little bit easier to get around in, but still fairly full, for pitching. Not as much leg movement not as much leg freedom as typical baseball uniforms are today.
Gabrielle, for the younger viewer out there, explain exactly what the bloomers would be.
Bloomers are basically a skirt cut in half that were full pants. And so there's still a lot of fabric, but it allowed a little bit more movement in the fact that you didn't have all the skirt folds, but they were basically very full pants.
Another interesting part of the Alta Weiss story, she was paid as a semi-professional player. She did receive some money, and she was actually able to use that money to better her life afterwards. She went to medical school and did become a doctor. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, she did. She was, in some various interviews that I was reading, that baseball was always her first love, but, her going into medical school gave her a career. She was, around, during the Spanish flu time, around during World War I, and so she saw a lot. But still quite, she paved the way for women going to medical school too. That wasn't very common those days either.
Absolutely. We're going to jump ahead a little bit in time, but talk about another important pioneer, Effa Manley, who at this point, the first only female member of the Baseball Hall of Fame, though that may change in future years. In the 1930s, Effa and her husband Abe purchased a Negro Leagues team and moved the franchise to Newark. The Newark Eagles became really a perennial powerhouse in the Negro Leagues. And Effa's story is as fascinating as the stories we've heard about umpires and players. She never played the game, but she did quite a bit as an executive.
She did. And it was, again, this is all in these times that women were expected to not be a part of baseball, that they were not part of the day-to-day operations, which Effa was. She and her husband, she owned the Newark Eagles, like you said, from about 1936 until she sold off a bunch of shares in 1948. But one of the things that she fought for after Jackie Robinson integrated with the big leagues, and that then major league teams began signing Negro League players, was that she fought for compensation for the Negro League teams, because they were just, MLB was just coming in and scooping up players and leaving the Negro Leagues teams, which were profitable and had their own league in their own right, in their own schedule, their own set of fans. They're just leaving them with nothing. And so Effa, fought to make sure that the teams were getting compensated for the signing of those players.
So she didn't want to stop the players from going to the major leagues. She simply wanted herself and the other owners to get some kind of compensation.
Yeah, because it's fair pay. She was also running a business just like MLB, Major League Baseball.
She had a reputation as a pretty generous owner. On average, it was believed she paid her players better than most of the other team owners in the Negro Leagues. When the team traveled, they traveled in an air-conditioned bus. And when they went on road trips and stayed in hotels, generally she tried to put the players in hotels that were better, the better hotels available to African Americans at the time. Mm-hmm. But beyond all that, she was really a big part of the civil rights movement of the 1940s.
Yeah, I mean, she was very important because she was making strides both as a woman and as an African American for equality. And so I think, yeah, she was hugely important both on and off the field.
One of the interesting stories about Effa is that she organized a boycott of some of the department stores in Harlem, New York, because they were not hiring African American clerks. Mm-hmm. And apparently the boycott was so effective that it forced many of these department stores to change their hiring policies. She also, believe it or not, held what were called anti-lynching nights at the ballpark. So yes, this was clearly someone that, yeah, baseball was obviously a passion, mm-hmm. but she was also looking at this bigger picture.
Right. She used her position to help further African American rights. And so I think that's incredibly awesome of her to be able to do that.
Now, she was elected to the Hall of Fame in 2006. So when our museum is reopened, hopefully sometime in the near future, if you walk into the plaque gallery and you go toward the end, toward the rotunda, and then a little bit to the left, you'll see Effa Manley's plaque included right there in the Hall of Fame, currently one of 329 plaques that we feature in our gallery. Whenever talking about the subject of women in baseball, and of course how it ties into our Diamond Dreams exhibit, the always popular subject of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, and this is a classic photo that is in the exhibit as well.
Mm-hmm. This is a really, really classic photo. It shows what happens when you play baseball in skirts and satin shorts that don't cover a whole lot when you slide. But these women who played in this league loved to play, and so they didn't care. They would play in whatever they were told to because they wanted the chance to play baseball, and that's what they loved. And I think that's a wonderful underlying story of this league, is that, through all this time, that those women, about the 600 women who played over the 12 years the league existed were playing because they loved the game, even if they had to wear mini dresses, basically.
Now that is a chaperone on the right side, and it says chaperone on her cap there as she's tending to the injured player. I know, Gabrielle, you've talked to a number of the players from the All-American League. Any general consensus on how they looked at having to wear these skirts? Was it a situation where initially they balked and then they eventually got used to it, or was this kind of a thorny issue with these players?
It was if they didn't wear it, they couldn't play. And so I think they basically were like, well, we want to play. I mean, they were getting also paid really well to play in that era. And so they just did it to the best of their ability, you know, catching in the skirts, squatting in the skirts. And one of the cool things about some of the artifacts, we have a number of uniforms from the league in our collection, which is really cool. But a couple of them have actually been altered. Like the skirts were altered to be not so full. And so that they weren't necessarily flapping around, getting caught in your legs. They actually, you know, tailored them to be a little bit narrower, which is really cool. It's clearly done by the women, not by the league.
Interesting. I had no idea that they had done that. You mentioned some of the uniforms featured. This is an actual exhibit case from our Diamond Dreams exhibit.
Yeah.
And this is all artifacts from the All-American League, which ran from 1943 to 1954. And of course, those two skirted uniforms really jump out at you.
They do. They really do. And that's, you know, those are real examples, you know, not movie props from, you know, a league of their own. Those are from AAGPBL. One of the cool things is that how popular this league grew. You know, in 43, it started out as 4 teams, but by the late 40s, there were as many as 8. And they were actually outdrawn those local teams. You know, there's Upper Midwest is where they were both basically home base. And they were actually outdrawing local minor league teams in terms of audiences and fans, which is really awesome that women were so popular and that they were playing baseball. One of my favorite lines that we use in this exhibit is that they dressed like ladies but played like pros. I love that line because, you know, clearly that is a very feminine outfit that they were wearing. You know, they had, as part of their training, especially in the early years, the women had to go to term school where they learned to be, you know, sit like a lady and drink tea like a lady, that kind of thing, be presentable in public, basically. And so they were expected to wear dresses and skirts when they were out in public. And so that they were just as feminine off the field as they were on the field.
Gabrielle, one of the things that really strikes me about this photograph, these uniforms are close to 80 years old, but they, at least in this picture, they look almost pristine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they really do. They were well taken care of, and they're well cleaned. I'm not sure if they got new uniforms each year or not. I'm not really sure about that. They might have in the later years when there was a little bit more money until funding ran out, but I'm not sure how often the uniforms were reused.
You see the one on the right has the belt. I don't see a belt on the one on the left. I'm assuming there was a belt that went with it, but perhaps that was not retained as part of the donation.
Correct.
You also see some of the teams that are featured here. The GR is Grand Rapids, and then to the left above that is the banner for the Grand Rapids Chicks. All the teams were essentially located in the Midwestern part of the country. States like Ohio and Illinois, Michigan, those kind of locations. Now, here we have another tunic, as it is called, but this is not authentic. This is a movie prop. Tell us about this.
It is. This is from a league of their own. Like I said earlier, with Penny Marshall is very inspired by the case that we had on women in baseball. And so that turned that around. And I think a league of their own really brought this league into the public eye. You know, a lot of league alums would talk about how they didn't talk about it. They didn't talk about that they played in this league until after this movie came out, because it was something they did in their lives. And I love that this movie made it so popular. It's really, I mean, it was definitely a turning stone in my growing up years of knowing that there were women who played in the league before I played baseball. Yeah, so this is a really popular and one of my personal favorite baseball movies. And obviously there are liberties that were taken. You know, the league, the real league actually started out more of as a softball league, did not become fully baseball throwing overhand pitching until later in the years. Whereas in the movie, they obviously show, you know, that transition from underhand to overhand pretty quickly. But Penny Marshall and her team really did a lot of research, and really did her research really well. Because if you look at this tunic, which was worn by Tracy Reiner, who played Betty Spaghetti in the movie, if you look how closely if you had a side by side, which you can do because we do have a section about the movie in the exhibit, you can see how closely these tunics match what the women actually wore, and that this was made for a movie, which, you know, you wouldn't necessarily see all the details, but you can see, you know, with the patch, the seaming, the top stitching, it was all it was really well done in terms of detail.
Go back to the other photograph. These, again, the authentic uniforms from the league, and the similarity to what Penny Marshall and her design staff came up with is very striking.
Yes.
Tracy, by the way, the daughter of the late Penny Marshall. Rob Reiner, the actor, who was married to Penny, actually not Tracy's father, but Tracy became very close to Rob and adopted or took his last name later in her life. So she is now known by that name. Now, there is a tunic prop from the movie that is in the exhibit.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you were telling me that it's the one worn by Gina Davis. We didn't have a photograph of that. We do have the photograph of Tracy's tunic, and this is now actually in a different exhibit.
Yep, this one's in our Baseball at the Movies exhibit over on the first floor in the library side of the building. And it's one way that we spread the wealth of the women in baseball story around is when we have multiple artifacts, you know, related to a subject. We try and make sure that story gets shared in multiple ways. So obviously, you know, A League of Their Own is a very big baseball movie, so we wanted to talk about it there. But we also had, you know, tunics like Gina Davis's tunic, and I think there's two others, a South Bend Blue Sox and a Racing Bells maybe, also in Diamond Dreams, because then, you know, people can see, you know, the movie costumes up close right there while they're talking about women in baseball. We try and make sure it's all shared and, you know, get to spread the wealth.
Another great tunic from the movie that we have, Megan Cavanaugh, who joined us for a reunion at the Hall of Fame a number of years ago for A League of Their Own. She's a delightful person, and she donated her prop tunic to the Hall of Fame, so that is in the collection as well. Mm-hmm. Speaking of reunions, last fall, we were all fortunate at the Hall of Fame to meet some of the surviving ladies from the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. It was a smaller reunion than some of the past ones that we've seen, in part because, unfortunately, many of the players from the league have either passed on or they are not well enough to travel long distances. But we did have this group of players join us last fall. You can see them outside of the museum in the photo on the left. And then they were inside the museum. They did a panel in the daytime for some school groups, and then they did a panel at night for visitors to the museum. Mm-hmm. This was a big thrill for me. I know it was a big thrill for you as well.
Oh, it was. Yeah, it was awesome. It was so cool. I've met, you know, before this reunion, I'd met a few of the women here and there, and but to see them together as a group and see them handing out baseball cards of themselves in their, you know, original Tunic uniforms to kids. It's just so, and I got a couple myself. They're just so awesome. They all have such character because, I mean, and in a way, to play in the league that they were playing in the time that they were playing, this was you know, the 40s and 50s was a time when women were expected to be mothers and homemakers, and here they were playing baseball and, you know, going around, you know, actually having a full season of baseball. and that this was one of their, I love how it was one of the things that was his favorite times of their lives because of all the, camaraderie between the women and the friendships that they made. It's really cool that they're still willing to get together. It's very awesome because a lot of them are now getting older. And so it was really, really cool to have them come to the hall last year.
You mentioned the baseball cards, and whether you want them or not, these players, they love to give them to you.
They do.
Which worked out well for me because my daughter, Maddie, she just turned 14 a couple of weeks ago. She wanted every one of these cards that were handed out. So I had to make sure to get one from each of them. And not all of them have cards, but a lot of them do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have a collection that's in our living room right now of all those cards.
Awesome. That's so great.
Yeah. They will never turn down an autograph.
Nope.
They love to sign. They love to tell stories. And they also love to talk about how they, felt like they were accomplishing something. They obviously went through struggles. They had to overcome obstacles. But they don't like to necessarily emphasize the obstacles. They like to emphasize their ability to achieve. That's the spirit I've noticed from the league.
Yeah. I agree.
Let's talk about some other pioneers. Here we have, like Effa Manley, an owner, but this was an owner in the major leagues, Joan Payson, first owner of the New York Mets franchise when they entered the National League in 1962. And she was also the owner of the Mets when they won their first world title in 1969. Somewhat of a forgotten figure in the history of baseball, but an important one nonetheless.
I agree. I mean, one of the things that you don't really necessarily think about when you think about baseball is talking about ownership. And that's also another place that women just aren't doing a lot of owning teams but Joan very much was. She came from a fair bit of money and she married a fair bit of money and she loved the game. And so it was just a perfect combination that she went and bought into the Mets. And was an owner for them, and I think until her death, really, that she was a major player as part of the ownership. I think it's really cool because, again, that's also not talked about so much, and that's why I really love in this exhibit that we cover not just women player, but also women off the field who also love the game, may not necessarily have played it, but they still have a passion for the game.
Some of our younger viewers might look at this and say, well, this is a ceremonial first pitch. Why isn't she throwing from the mound? She's throwing from the stands.
Well, back in the day, that's how first pitches were thrown. It was, thrown from the stands. You did not go onto the mound or in front of the mound and embarrass yourself. Instead, you just toss the ball into the field. Instead, we now have oodles and oodles of bloopers of terrible first pitches from various celebrities. So good laughs either way.
I'm guessing this photo is from the late 60s, might have been from that championship season of 1969. And as you mentioned, probably wasn't until the 1980s that the whole habit of throwing out first pitches from the mound began. But in the 60s, everything done right from the front row, usually box seats along the first base side.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about media contributions. Here another image from the exhibit. The microphone used by Suzyn Waldman, still broadcasting for the New York Yankees.
Yep, she is. She became the first color commentator for Major League Baseball. And this is a microphone that she used back in 2005, actually about the same time that we opened our exhibit. And it's interesting that she was the first one, and it was 2005 that she became the first female color commentator. There was obviously with equality, it's a slow building, always building on top of each other. But it wasn't until the 70s that women were even allowed in press boxes. And it wasn't until, lawsuits and, late 70s that women were then allowed in the locker rooms to even do interviews with the players. And so Suzyn Waldman, I'm sure, faced just as much problematic and sexism while building her career. Something that she's passionate about, something about, passionate about baseball and, being able to talk and tell people about it. So I think it's really important that we talk about that, and that's why we cover that here in the exhibit as well.
The predecessor, I guess, to Jessica Mendoza, who has made a nice career for herself working at ESPN, but really did start with Suzyn Waldman.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about another significant female contributor in a different area, Janet Marie Smith. We have a construction helmet from the early 1990s, and she really the driving force behind the building of Camden Yards.
She really was. Yeah, she was the vice president of planning and development for the Orioles from 1989 to 1994, and was responsible for what Camden Yards looks like today, which is awesome because that's the ballpark I grew up going to. I really love that ballpark. It's always going to have a special place in my heart. But yeah, she started this idea of retro ballparks that fans would connect to and feel like they're in a baseball stadium. She was responsible in 1997 to turn Olympic Stadium in Atlanta to turn into Turner Field, which is just closed a couple of years ago. But and she's been hired by the Dodgers. She's been all over and really creating a difference in our ballpark experience as fans.
A few years back, Janet Marie was the keynote speaker at our annual symposium on American baseball and baseball history. I wanted to go to that. Unfortunately, I had a video conference that day, so I could not go. Did you have a chance to meet Janet Marie?
I did not. That was, I think, before my time or right around the time I started. Yeah.
Janet Marie, by the way, is going to be our featured guest later in the week. We're going to do a virtual Voices of the Game on Friday. And that's going to be a little bit later than usual. It's going to be at 1 o'clock because Janet Marie is working for the Dodgers, as Gabrielle indicated. So she's on the West Coast. We want to have her get up at a more normal time. So Janet Marie will be our guest coming up Friday, 1 o'clock Eastern time. This, to me, is one of the great stories told in Diamond Dreams, the story of this young little leaguer, Maria Pepe. Tell us about it, Gabrielle.
Well, without Maria Pepe, I would not have had any start of any baseball career because she's the one who paved the way for girls to play Little League Baseball. Back in, jumping back a few years before Maria Pepe, Katherine Johnston played Little League Baseball disguised as a boy in the 1950s. But once Little League found out, the next year they banned girls from playing Little League Baseball. And so it wasn't until the 70s, 72 actually, that Maria Pepe played in her New Jersey team. It was about 3 games that she was only allowed to play before Little League Baseball told the team either kick her off the team or you're removed from the league. So it's really sad story in that respect. But Maria Pepe didn't stop fighting. Her and her family actually went to court against Little League Baseball for the right for girls to play Little League. And it took 2 years, but they eventually won, and girls now had the right to play in Little League. Unfortunately, by that time, Maria Pepe was too old to play in Little League because you can only play in Little League until you're until you're 12. And but again, if she had not done that, if she and her family had not gone to court for Little League Baseball, hundreds and hundreds of girls would not have been able to play the game they love, including me. So there's a lot of thanks to Maria Pepe for going through what she did, even at such a young age.
Another beneficiary of Maria Pepe, Katie Brownell. In 2005, Katie Brownell, pitching in upstate New York Little League ball, pitched what is called a perfect game.
Yep.
Not only did she retire every batter, no one reached base, she struck out every batter, hence the perfect game. Later, 2005, she was invited to the Hall of Fame to partake in a ceremony. Dale Petrosky, the president of the Hall of Fame, extended the invite, hosted the presentation. Katie donated her Little League Dodgers uniform, which you see on the right side. To me, though, the really great part of the story is this mystery surprise guest to the right of Katie Brownell.
Yep, that is all grown up Maria Pepe right there. And, and you can just see the pride in her face of that, what she went through in Little League in the 70s to allow girls like Katie to be able to play baseball is just so evident and so awesome that she was able to make it to the hall at the same time that Katie came, and that it all worked out and that they were able to meet each other. It's really awesome. And I love that we have Katie's jersey. You know, it's not easy to strike out 18 batters in a row. So
Maria is just beaming. I mean,
Yeah,
she looks more excited than Katie.
I feel like Katie might have been a little nervous. I mean, you know, it's a big ordeal.
You know, Katie just about 2-3 years ago actually came to the Hall of Fame. She, of course, much older now. She's in her probably mid to late 20s, but was recognized by one of our staff. And then we kind of gave her and her family an impromptu behind the scenes tour of the library. She's kind of a physical fitness guru today. She does a lot of personal training with people. Very modest about her accomplishments, but real thrill for me to be able to meet her and take her around the library. The jersey that you see on the right, the Dodgers Little League jersey, was initially in Diamond Dreams, but that has since been relocated.
It has, yeah. It used to live in Diamond Dreams, but when we opened our exhibit One for the Books, which is our name for our record room up on the 3rd floor, we actually moved that jersey up there because it's really a record-setting jersey, and we wanted to talk more than just about major leaguers setting records. We're talking about all baseball players setting records, and a perfect game in Little League qualifies as a record. And so that's where it is today. So yep, it's right now up on the 3rd floor.
Just wonderful seeing these two generations come together here. All right, now we're going to have some fun. We're going to make the transition into your career. Who is this adorable child that we see here?
That is me, if you hadn't guessed. This is my junior Babe Ruth team when I was 14 years old, about 2006. Yep. So this is I was playing the team that year was the Cubs. Throughout my junior Babe Ruth career, which is 3 years, 13, 14, and 15. I played for the Nationals, I played for the Cubs, and then I played for the Orioles. So this is the middle one. It's a photo I had on hand for you. And yeah, this is, I've made the adjustment pretty well to, Babe Ruth, you're jumping from Little League size bases to, and pitching distance to Babe Ruth, which is a full field, 90-foot bases. And so now at 14, had made that adjustment pretty well. It's basically the same group of guys I was playing with, through Little League and through growing up. It was a very small local league, and so it was the same guys basically up through the years, basically a group of brothers, as it were. And so I was one of the guys, except I had ponytails.
You're better known for your pitching, but they had you hold a bat here.
This is in the formal shots of, when you have your team photos, you get your individual photos, things like that. So, yeah, there's always the pose with the bat.
Now, here we have the 2011 Yankees. Well, not the Yankees in the Bronx, but they are in Palmerton, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Towamensing. Tell us about this team.
This is a couple years later. This is my one of my senior Babe Ruth teams. This is actually my last year in senior Babe Ruth. So it's about 18 going on 19 here. And yeah, this is a lot of those guys I had played with basically all growing up. So Little League all the way up until this photo was taken. And so they're all about my age. This is it was either this year or the previous season. We did really well and had won our local area senior Babe Ruth championship in the league. So that was pretty cool. We did really well. And by this point, I was a starting pitcher. I was also starting shortstop or second baseman. I hated the outfield. It's still not my favorite position. But I would play there if I had to, Yeah.
So you're right in the second row in the very middle of the photograph.
Yeah, you can pick me up by that ponytail.
Yeah. And then upper left-hand corner, older gentleman, I assume that's your coach?
Yep,
How did he treat you?
Oh, fantastic. I mean, he's more than happy to have me on the team because, I was just as good, if not better than some of those guys in that photo, not to brag. Yeah. So yeah, both on both corners are my coaches. And so Don Hunter, who was on the left. He actually passed away a couple years ago. Yeah, he knew me all through Senior Babe Ruth. The gentleman on the right, we called him Coach Stig. He and his son had come up basically through the same years as I did. His son was just a year younger than me. And so, yeah, they knew who I was. They're happy to have me there.
I love the uniforms too. The Yankees across the front, but with the pinstripes. Very cool. Very nice. Here's a great shot of you, Doubleday Field. This is part of the Baseball for All initiative. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so after I aged out of Senior Babe Ruth, I wanted to keep playing baseball, and I actually was playing I played in a couple different men's wooden bat leagues. One of them was out in Erie, Pennsylvania, where I was going to graduate school. And that league out there had never had a female baseball player in part of their league in their history. And so Erie, being a fairly small city, did have a newspaper feature on me, which was a very interesting experience. But they also, that's how Justine Siegel, who started and runs Baseball for All, which is a all women, all girls baseball league, across the United States. That's how she found me. And she messaged me, and she said that she was having this tournament up in Cooperstown in 2014, and wanted to know if I'd be interested. And I said, sure. Can I bring my sister? Because she also plays. And so that's how we ended up in Cooperstown for the first time, and also playing at Doubleday Field, which, beyond words of, just being able to play in such a historic ballpark. But then it was also the first time that my sister and I had ever played on an all-girls team, all-girls league or tournament, where everyone had some sort of long hair or ponytails, when we're used to being the only ones with long hair on this field. And so, yeah, I love this shot that my mom actually took, and that we're sitting in the dugout together watching what's going on out on the field.
So your sister's the catcher. What is her name?
Stephanie.
Okay.
Yep.
And she's naturally a catcher, or was this done so that the sisters could be the battery?
No, she is naturally the catcher. I have never been drawn to that position. I could play basically anywhere on the ball field, except for catcher. Don't put me behind the plate. The rest of the 9 other guys need to be out and hurt before I go behind the plate.
Yeah. It's a tough position to play, no question. Now, this might be my favorite photo of the entire presentation. You've all just met on the mound. You're all seemingly having a great time. So this is not exactly a Bob Gibson, Tim McCarver situation. Gibson rather famously, whenever McCarver would come out to the mound to talk to him, would say, "What are you doing out here? The only thing you know about pitching is that you can't hit it." So you guys are having a better time than Gibson and McCarver did.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's what this tournament was about playing baseball and having fun and getting to know these girls from all over the country who came to this tournament. We had, I think, enough girls for 3 teams that came for this tournament, which is really awesome. And yeah, this is, I think, the shots from our championship game, the final game. We won it all, but yeah, we're having a blast, going over strategy, talking on the mound. It was so much fun. And the fact that not only was I playing with these women, I was also on the same team as my sister. She and I were about 4 years apart. And so we really never played on the same team growing up, because there's just enough of a shift, when she was at my age group of Little League, I was just going up to Babe Ruth. By the time she was in Babe Ruth, I was in Senior Babe Ruth. So the fact that we got to play on the same team, in uniform, not just in the backyard, is really awesome. And one of my favorite moments, being in Cooperstown for the first time.
Now, both you and your sister are clearly laughing here. Who made the comment that broke everybody up?
Oh, I don't know. I think the photographer had mentioned to both of us at some point before that he wanted to get a sister shot of us, talking on the mound together. And it was just a weird and awkward, like trying to make it look natural, but at the same time it was not happening, which is, I think, why all of us are laughing.
Yeah. It's a great photo from historic Doubleday Field, which, by the way, is currently under renovation. Hopefully, it will be open later in the season. We want to take your questions for Gabrielle Augustine, our curator at the Baseball Hall of Fame. We've been talking women in baseball, talking about our Diamond Dreams exhibit. If you have questions, just go to our chat room. There is a chat function on your computer screen, and you can type your questions in there. We have a question from Jeff Arnett, and that is a familiar name. Jeff used to be the head of education at the Baseball Hall of Fame, big baseball fan. He has worked in education for pretty much all of his adult life. And Jeff wants to know how many of the women from the All-American Girls League are still living today. I don't know the numbers. I know we had about 20 that were here for the reunion. Sadly, the number is dwindling. I mean, there were several hundred women that played in the league for its 12-year existence. And I would imagine at this point, this is just a guess, Gabrielle, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong. I'm going to guess there's probably under 150 still around.
I would, yeah, if 150, maybe even 100, I don't know. Yeah. If you think about it, they're all, in their 20s, late teens, early 20s when they were playing. And so add over half a century to that. So
we had about 20 that came and saw us, including one of our old favorites, Salty Ferguson, who's been visiting the Hall of Fame for years. So they are part of that kind of diminishing group, but they're the ones that came here last year, so lively, so energetic, and so willing to talk about their careers. Brian Rome wants to know, when is the next time ladies from the All-American League will be coming to the Hall of Fame? Brian, we honestly don't know the answer to that. There was some talk that maybe last year's event would be the final reunion. We don't know if that's the case. Certainly if they want to come back, they're always welcome, but I don't know if that is something that they're planning to do in the near future. Let's see if we can get some other questions. This is from Mitch Bernstein, who's one of our regular followers. He wants to know, why do you think baseball is the last sport to allow women professional officials umpires? Gabby?
Well, I think the Umpire Association is an old boys club. And it takes, it's a hard enough path for a ball player to make it from the minors to the majors. It's an even smaller, harder path to make it as an umpire from the minors to the majors because there's so few spots to fill. And once someone, male, makes it to the majors as an umpire, they're going to be there for a very long time. And so it's very rare then that spots open up, and so that women are still climbing the ladder to get to that spot. It's a long, hard cycle, and it's gonna probably still gonna take a while.
I believe you said earlier there's at least 2 women in the minor leagues now umpiring?
Correct. Yep. Jen Powell and Emma Charlesworth-Sealer. I believe they're both in single A at the moment.
Currently none. There never have been in the major leagues, but there are female officials, a number of them in the NBA. And I believe the NFL, within the last 2 years, has hired at least 1 or 2 female officials, on-the-field officials. So it's an area where baseball has not quite caught up.
Nope.
One of our participants, Carol Sheldon, who is actually a board member for the All-American Girls League, is watching and listening. We welcome Carol, and she points out that there are under 100 living members of the league. So Thank you, Carol, for giving us a more specific number there. Let's see, other questions that we have in our chat function. Again, you can type those questions in, and we would be happy to try to answer the questions. This is not a question, but a comment from Betsy Alverson. She says, so happy you were doing this. My mom's name is there, and she played some in the league from 1951 to 1954. Well, that's terrific
awesome
to hear, Betsy. Be curious if she had the same last name as you or a different last name. We could look her up, because we do have an entire roster in the exhibit of all the players that were known to have played in the All-American Girls League. Just scrolling through, here's a great question from Michelle. What advice does Gabrielle have for a little girl interested in Little League, but currently has no baseball for all team available to her?
Well, I didn't have baseball for all for me growing up either. I played, I was in Little League. There were a few more girls in my Little League, but by, you know, as they got older, 11, 12 years old, they started switching to softball. And by the time I was in junior Babe Ruth, I was the only girl in my league. You can still go out there and play. It is not, there's nothing wrong. I've always enjoyed competing against the boys. I really love striking the guys out. There's something very satisfying to that. But that doesn't mean you have to go out there and be a pitcher. You can go out there and compete just as well as the boys. And I think, my baseball career, my dad taught me how to play. And he's, was one of my coaches for a lot of time growing up, and most of the teams, if not an assistant coach, a head coach. And so that's how I learned baseball. But good coaching is very important to learn how to play. And I think as support of your parents, support of your coaches, and that'll make the path of being the only girl a little easier. And there's nothing wrong with that. Wear it with pride.
For you, Gabrielle, was there that initial fear to go out on the field for the first time? Was that a problem for you at all?
When I was little, no.
Yeah.
It didn't strike me as anything abnormal. Like I said, there were a couple other girls, who played when I was, 8, 9 years old. But then they started, like I said, they started switching to softball, whether their parents switched them or they wanted to switch themselves. But I always wanted to keep playing baseball. There's never, I started noticing it more in my teen years, that, I am the only girl. And that was when we started, it wasn't, our league was in Babe Ruth was a bit broader. We traveled a little bit more. And so there were other players who had never seen a female ball player before. There's a fun story when I was 13. It was a really cold day that we were playing. I think it was May. It's still like 45 degrees out or something. Parents bundled them blankets and everything. And I'm on the mound. And at that point, I was wearing my hair in 2 braids. And after one of the innings that I pitched, one of my coaches had come back from coaching the first was telling all of us that the other team was saying, "That boy's got ponytails." Like that it didn't even cross their minds that it was a girl. So, but yeah, it wasn't really till I was older that walking out onto the field as an only girl was more noticeable for me. So.
We're going to take one more question, and it's kind of an interesting one from Cornwall in the UK, United Kingdom. Amanda tells us that on the 12th of May coming up, that'll mark the first all-female game in the UK. An American actress named Edith Day played a key role in creating this event and played for a team known as Rio Rita. If you ever heard of Edith May before, I would love to find out more about her background. I honestly have not heard of you. Have you, Gabby?
I have not. I'm writing her name down right now so I can look that up.
So apparently that is coming up May the 12th, which is a week from today in the United Kingdom. And again, the name of the actress is Edith May. It's not clear to me if Edith May is a current actress or a former actress, but we'll have to look up that name and try to find out more. We lost our signal there for just a moment. I was just wrapping it up with Gabrielle. Gabrielle, thanks again. It's been great, wonderful insights on the exhibit and also on your own career in baseball. Thanks for being with us.
Not a problem. It was a lot of fun. Always happy to do it again.
Again, our topic with Gabrielle has been Women in Baseball, the Diamond Dreams exhibit at the Hall of Fame. We have some more programs coming up later in the week. Thursday at 1 o'clock, we're going to be doing a virtual field trip through the CILC organization, the Center for Interactive Learning. The program is going to be American history through baseball uniforms. You can actually register for that program either with us or at the CILC website. And that's Thursday, 1 o'clock Eastern time. And then on Friday, we'll be talking about one of the subjects of today's program, Janet Marie Smith, the driving force behind Camden Yards. She has also done some wonderful work at Fenway Park and currently at Dodger Stadium. And Janet Marie joins us Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern time for the next in our series of virtual voices of the game. So that's all coming up. Thanks for being with us, everybody. We hope you have enjoyed it and have a great day. Thanks.